Hey guys, Matt from Crank Engineering, and we're up to part 2 of the welding video series. So last week we took a look at arc welding and a quick look at how the machine works and the basic principles of arc welding, and this week we're going to have a look at my MIG welding rig and we'll have a quick talk about that and how it works. Okay, so no different to the arc welding setup. The machine's a big power supply and it sends current through to the workpiece and then back to the machine. So this has got an earth return or grounding cable, whatever you want to call it, and it's plugged into the machine down here. And it's also got a torch which is connected up here. So we talked about the arc welding process last week, where you've got a consumable electrode, and as you're welding, the metal from that electrode goes onto the weld and the flux coating shields the weld. So it's a little bit different with the MIG welding. We've got a big bottle of gas connected to the back of the machine, and it provides gas right through the machine, out through this hose and out the tip of the torch here. And that gas, which in this case is a mixture of CO2 and argon, that gas shields the weld and keeps the oxygen and the atmosphere and everything else away from the weld while you're welding and then while it cools down. So that's just simply delivered out these nozzles in the tip here. So we don't have an electrode that gets shorter and shorter than we have to replace like we do when we arc welding. We've got a spool. We've got a spool in the machine in here, and I can see, hopefully you can see the copper wire here. So this is the consumable electrode which replaces the sticks in an arc welding process. So that consumable electrode is stored on a spool, and there's a little drive in here, and when you press the button and start the process, it turns the motor on and feeds the wire down through the cable and out the end here. So you get an arc between the end of the wire and the workpiece, and we're continually feeding the wire into it. So that's what deposits onto the weld to form your weld bead. So basically you don't have to stop. So when you're arc welding and your electrode gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, you've got to stop and take it out, replace it. With the MIG weld, you just keep going while you can. So for that respect, it's probably, from a production perspective, if you're doing a lot of welding, it would be quicker. But from a hobbyist and a home handyman and a project builder, whether you're building cars or bikes, this is easy to use. So there's only one control you have to worry about, which is the button to turn it on and off. Now, to suit the different materials that you're welding and the different thicknesses, there's a couple of adjustments you can make. On my particular machine, I've got a voltage regulation switch here from 1 to 8. So what that does, there's a big transformer in here, and there'll be tappings off that transformer to get different voltages at the end of the electrode here. So I can choose, so if I've got a thin piece of car body material to weld, I don't need much current, so I need to turn it down. But if I'm welding 3 or 5, 6 mil steel plate, then I need to turn it up. So I can adjust how much voltage is provided with that switch there. In conjunction with that, I've got one dial on this machine, and that sets the speed of how fast the wire is fed out. So if I've got a big weld on some heavy plate, I need to feed a lot of wire into that to keep the weld going. So I need to turn the speed up. And if I'm only welding very thin sheet metal, I need to turn the speed down. So those two controls allow me to adjust the machine to suit the material that I'm welding. On top of that, you can get different thicknesses of wire that go into the machine. I think this is 0.6, but I think you can get 0.35 and probably 0.9. So depending on the type of work you're doing, you would buy a spool to suit. So this one works just fine for the sort of work I do. And I predominantly use the MIG if I'm knocking up workbenches and fabricating like that. I don't use it a lot on the bike because at this point, with this wire and with this gas, it's only good for steel. So I can't use it on aluminium and I can't use it on stainless unless I change gases and I change the liner and the torch and I change the wire I'm using, which is a bit of an expense and takes a bit of time. So my preference is to use TIG welding for that purpose. So we'll talk about that in the next video. But if you're just doing steel, and maybe you've got a project car like a hot rod or something you're working on and you want to build an exhaust or repair some panels, or you're working on your bike and you've got steel tanks and steel frames, this might be perfectly fine for what you're looking for. So don't discount it. Just consider the sort of work you want to be doing on your bike and pick the best machine for the job. So there's a quick intro to MIG welding and the features of the machine. Hopefully that was useful. If you've got any questions, let me know down below so we can hopefully give you the information you need to keep your bike project rolling. Thanks for watching.